Hi, everybody. Well, tonight is one of those rare nights when everybody in the store wanted to be on this chat. Um, and this is probably our favorite book of 2020. We are so excited to get to talk to Daniel Nayeri tonight about his new book. Well, it's not new anymore, but it's Everything Sad is Untrue. And it is one of the most beautifully written, sometimes laugh out loud and heart-wrenching books that I've ever read. And for those of you who don't know, Daniel got the Printz Award, which is the top award in young adult fiction for 2020. Donna, who works here, Donna, will you raise your hand? Donna predicted this, so she's our sayer here tonight. And for those of you who don't know, Daniel's also in publishing, which gives him a double whammy. So not only is he a writer, but he publishes other people's work, and he works for Big Dot. And we are just so excited to have you here tonight, Daniel.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate it.
And why don't you tell us our big question was, we can also tell you that we've sold more of your book to adults than we have kids. We had this one gentleman who came in and he said, I want the book you guys are all yammering about. And I said, what do you mean by the book we're all yammering about? And he goes, the one by the guy with the funny last name. And I went, oh, I go, you want Everything Sad is Untrue. So that was one of my very favorite experiences with this book, was the book that we were all yammering about. So why don't you tell us how you were inspired to write it and why you chose to publish it in the children's realm?
Sure. Well, thank you for yammering. So what inspired me to write it is I lived it, and all my life I had sort of had to explain it all to everybody I ever met. Like there's almost this joke that in my family, like it's sort of how long can we go before in any time, you meet someone before they're like, so where are you from? And you kind of have to do that thing where you're like, well, I was raised in Oklahoma, but I'm from Iran. That's where my family's from and where I'm from and where I was born. And they're like, oh, cool. And where are your parents now? And I'm like, well, my dad's in Iran and my mom's in, all over the place. And so, and really quickly, the questions start piling up and the question marks start piling up next to their, behind their eyes. And I'm like, okay, let me just explain. And so it's a story I've had to tell a lot, and I love to tell. It's to give you a quick, I know you read it, but the quick background of the book is about, well, the central arc of the book is that when I was 5, my mother, I was born in Iran. My mother was a devout Muslim, and she converted to Christianity, and so which is a capital crime. And so she ran afoul of the secret police in Iran. This is sort of post-revolution Iran, post-theocracy. There was a secret police. Well, there was a secret police beforehand too. But anyway, they were called ominously the Comité, which is the committee. And the committee, so she runs afoul of them, and we have to kind of get out of the country quite quickly. My father chose to stay. But my mother, my sister, and I became refugees, and so we went from the UAE to Italy, refugee camp there, until finally we were given asylum to the United States. So the book kind of opens as this young narrator, Daniel. My name is Khosrow. Daniel was my sort of Western name, so that's how you pronounce it. And so young Khosrow is standing in front of a classroom. He's the poorest kid. He's the refugee kid. He barely speaks English. But he's weaving this tale of his life back in Iran. He's trying to explain that he wasn't always this way. He used to have 2 parents, and he wasn't always so downtrodden, but lived in a place that he starts to actually I wouldn't say embellish. I think what he starts to do really is to take his memories and then take all the stories that he was told as a child, and then take all the mythology of his culture and all the legends, and they all start to kind of mix into his description of what his homeland was like. And so in the book, the land of stories, which in my language is Dostan, the land of storytelling, starts to mix with the land of history and the land of memory. And so he's explaining all this. And of course, the kids in his class in Oklahoma are fairly dubious, and rightfully so. And so you start to get not just the story of the flight from Iran in this sort of one particular arc of my mother, my sister, and I, but you start to rather get all the history of 4 generations in my family. So it starts to go back further and further. And this is in order so that he can explain the context, more and more richly. So that's the story of the book. And as I said, so when I came to Oklahoma, this all happened. This is all true. So when I was living it, there was this really common thing that would happen all the time is anytime I would want to go play soccer with my friend, and I'd knock on the door and say, hi, can Blake come out to play? Parents being good parents are kind of wondering, is this a good kid? Is this a bad kid? Let me ask him some questions. And so they would ask questions. And before I knew it, I'd be standing there with my friend holding a soccer ball, tapping his feet. And I'd be trying to get through this story as fast as possible. So and the parents would be like, hold on, you can go play in a second. So what happened in Italy? And I became enamored with telling the story, telling it 100 different ways. The facts would stay the same, but I would change the details in order to, suit the audience. And I really credit all that kind of experience as how I ended up not just falling in love with stories, but the kind of stories I like to tell. The kind of stories I love are like the ones that experiment with form, and really, I love this. There's a great Italo Calvino book called, it's right here, the Castle of Crossed Destinies. Have you seen this? Where he does the classic like form play. He's just showing off how great he is. Where he shuffled a deck of tarot cards and then told a story based on the order that he laid out the deck, and then he reshuffled the deck, laid it out again in a different way, and told another story. And you're just like, I love that sort of, telling the same story in a lot of different ways. And so that's what inspired me to tell it. I always thought it was sort of this really heroic thing that my mother had done, and I really, growing up with her, I felt like I really had to tell her story. So that was the inspiration. Why I told it as for kids is a little bit of a different reason. I actually started writing this for adults. First, actually, as an essay collection, as part of my writing sort of coursework in university, and then and it was the essays they were fine, but they were not what I wanted to tell. And so then I started writing it as a sort of a literary novel, and I realized really quickly that I was sort of telling it from that remove of an adult remembering something. I've been lucky enough as an adult to kind of process a lot of that chaos, and not sort of still live in it. And as a result, writing from that perspective was almost too emotionally neutered. And so I said, you really have to get to the moment of trouble, and you really have to get to the moment where, in any coming of age story, a child sort of turns their face to adulthood. And so why don't we go to that moment? And that really unlocked everything. I think as soon as I said, all right, let me tell this from like absolutely myself, but as I remember myself as a 12-year-old, then it made all the sense in the world, and that voice kind of came out, and his sort of emotional transparency comes out quite a bit more. Like he doesn't realize how much he's divulging throughout the story. He'll even say like, and I didn't cry, right? And clearly in the description, you can tell that he's been falling or something like that. He's unable, in the way that Gormless kind of narrators are, to hide the parts that he wants to hide. So I like that. I think there's an emotional transparency in having a character tell you they don't want to tell you something, but having that information still get through that requires like a 12-year-old, because most adults are pretty good at hiding it, right? So so that was why it was for kids. That was a really long answer, though. I bet you're regretting that two-parter. Yeah.
And I know that you worked with a relatively new press,
Mm-hmm.
and Daniel, I mean, it's Arthur Levine's press.
It is.
And for those of you who don't know, Arthur Levine is the editor of Harry Potter. He discovered Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And I think he said he started this press because he wanted more freedom.
Yeah. More creative freedom. I mean, so he's also the editor of like Philip Pullman, The Amber Spyglass. He's the editor of like one of my probably my favorite illustrator. All of the art like on this wall in my home is by Sean Tan. He's the editor of him. Just wonderful, quirky, international, middle grade and young fiction. So so he was at Scholastic. He had his own. We used to joke, not me and him, because I don't joke about this stuff with him. but there's only two names on Harry Potter. One's J.K. Rowling and the other is Arthur Levine on the spine, right? So he's made his legacy in publishing twice fold already. So when we were looking at who to go with, he was actually still at Scholastic, and yeah, we sent it only to him. I think he's sort of the. There's some really wonderful editors, and I know a lot of.
Yeah, but he's a master.
Yeah, he's kind of a legend. So
I know Arthur. I've known Arthur for years. So and he has one of the most incredible eyes when it comes to picking out kind of earth-shattering fiction. And I have to admit, I was not going to read this until Donna, and then Sam, and then Mike, and everyone said, this is so in your wheelhouse. And I said, okay, I'll read it. And then I actually put it on Libro and listened to it with you reading it. And I felt like you were my personal storyteller.
Thank you.
So I have to say that I've gone back and read parts of it, because the writing is just, it took my breath away at some points, just the way you saw things, like, especially when your sister gets her finger.
Yeah.
And just the way you said it. And I was just kind of going, oh my God. And she was just really excited to get, the ice cream at the end of the fingers thing. And then you're just going, okay. And then when you peed in the luggage store.
Right. Oh, that one.
There were just certain things that I was going, oh, that's such a little boy thing. And then the fascination with poop.
Extreme fascination. Yeah.
Yeah. You can talk to Sam. She's got all boys, and she can tell you that there's a lot of poop talk in her house.
Arthur had to edit out, actually. There's one line that actually refers to Arthur, where it said, Mrs. Miller says I cannot tell any more poop jokes or poop stories. And that was that literally was an edit that Arthur made in the manuscript. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to put you into this book, sir. And so, but because he told me I couldn't do anymore. And I had at least 3 or 4 good ones. So I will say, I think poop is, so I sometimes go back and forth with the high and the low, the best review I ever got actually was someone said, a delightful amalgam of the silly and sublime. And I was like, I will live off that compliment for the rest of my career. And really the reason for that is because that I love this. I love that. And I think it's very true to at least my life. And I think it's true to a lot of lives where people sort of, I'll go back one more step. Like my friend used to, when I was writing this, he used to tease me and say, so are you finished with your tale of immigrant woe yet? And I would be like, and he used to say this, it was kind of a little bit of a razz, and maybe he was kind of poking me about the genre. And so, you know, sometimes I think people do think that if you're telling a story of a pretty hard childhood, then it's just nothing but woe. And the opposite is true. I think, you know, laughter, as we know, is free. And so often in the poorest neighborhoods, often in, you know, the worst backgrounds, you know, they're laughing all day, because that's sort of the entertainment you get, right? That's the you can make for yourself. So the silly and the sublime, I find, often smash into each other, because in these moments of extreme seriousness, there's almost always something that cuts the tension and cuts that. So Poop in some ways is this like grand kind of silly, childish thing to put inside of this otherwise very earnest, epic kind of story, and kind of in some ways intended to be the counterbalance. But yeah, I also think of it from the perspective of, like, someone, Rishi says this all the time. It's like, or like this theme that, like, Poop is kind of like, I'm sorry, I can't believe I'm waxing poetic about Poop, but you know, like you know, in our kind of, if you take humans to just be like animals, right, then all they take in is food, and all they put out is poop, and this is like the human animal, and then you die, and that's all there is. But there's sort of nobler callings than this, right? Like, and you know, in the emotional state, there are people who just take in a lot of pain, and they put out a lot of pain. And there's a lot of characters in the books who do that too. You get to see their lives were really difficult and made difficult, and then they make other people's lives really difficult. And then you see sort of my mother, the figure of my mom, who I think her heroism is here. Like, she doesn't actually protect us from everything. She doesn't come here and conquer the Americas. She doesn't come here and, like, you know, win any awards or become a you know, a big whatever CEO. Like, she doesn't do any of that. Her heroism is entirely in the fact that she takes in quite a lot of pain and somehow does not metabolize it into putting out a whole lot of pain, right? Like, she does not pass it forward to her kids. And it really is a shockingly noble thing to do, to sort of take it in and put out something beautiful, put out love or art or beauty or whatever it is. So the theme of Poop actually comes back in this really way that for me is very poetic, because there are characters in the book that are just, you know, soiled and they're just, you know, wallowing in this sort of, you know, muck. And then you have my mom, who sort of ends up going through the worst of all of it, and kind of manages to rise above it. So
I don't know. I mean, even we watched the video of you and your mom cooking,
mm-hmm.
and she seems like an eternal optimist. Like, she's always going to find the bright side of every situation. I mean, even though yours weren't like hers, she still said that yours were better in a way.
She said that on video, for what it's worth. She's also very competitive. But she is. You're absolutely right. She's very much an optimist. Very, you know. My mom is one of the only people in, you know, I think I can write, and she comes off as like she comes off almost like a cartoon, right? But she's real.
No, she felt really real to me. I mean, and then when I watched the video of the two of you cooking together, and just your banter and how easy it was, and the fact that she was basically telling you in a very subtle way, but very sweet way, that you weren't doing it right.
Yeah, that's what. Yes, then you did catch that. That is exactly how she does it. That's true.
I mean, I thought that for what she went through, she, you know, I mean, to have a death warrant on your head because of your faith, and to go ahead and pack up two little kids and move them around the world. I mean, what a brave person.
Yeah. Yeah, she's unbelievably well adjusted for what she's gone through. Like she will tell me these things, and she's just made from sterner stuff. I don't know. I've met people with half as much struggle and 10 times as much bitterness in their lives, and rightfully so. Life is hard. I'm not sort of comparing her to, well, I am comparing her to everyone. She's my mom, so I think she's the best. but I really am sort of genuinely, objectively, as far as you can be as an adult, really, admiring of the fact that she's been able to sort of weather it, right?
And not only weather it, but see the positive.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And she's also been able to, like, instead of assimilating completely, she's maintained a lot of your traditions.
Yeah, no, in fact, she still shows up to potlucks with like food that nobody can pronounce, and she's there to evangelize her food as much as possible. So yeah, she's something else. It's really funny. It's really funny to watch her go to picnics with just an unbelievable array of alien foods, and then seeing who she can convert.
Do you want to read a little bit for us?
Sure, I would love to. Here, let me. I suppose the opener. By the way, the books. Every book I have is a book of someone I've tried to sign for whose name I've misspelled, and I've had to buy back from the store. So this one's to Amy. All right. I guess I'll start at the opening, and maybe do about 5 pages if I can. All right. All Persians are liars, and lying is a sin. That's what the kids in Mrs. Miller's class think, but I'm the only Persian they've ever met, so I don't know where they got that idea. My mom says it's true, but only because everyone has sinned and needs God to save them. My dad says it isn't. Persians aren't liars, they're poets, which is worse. Poets don't even know when they're lying. They're just trying to remember their dreams. They're trying to remember 6,000 years of history and all the versions of all the stories ever told. In one version, maybe I am not the refugee kid in the back of Mrs. Miller's class. I am a prince in disguise. If you catch me, I will say what they say in the 1001 Nights. Let me go, and I will tell you a tale passing strange. That's how they all begin, with a promise. If you listen, I'll tell you a story. We can know and be known to each other, and then we're not enemies anymore. I'm not making this up. This is a rule that even genies follow. In the 1001 Nights, Scheherazade, the rememberer of all the world's dreams, told stories every night to the king, so he would spare her life. But in here, it's just me, counting my own memories. And you, reader, whoever you are, you're the king. I'm not sucking up, by the way. The king is evil and was made a bloody massacre of 1,000 lives before he got to Scheherazade. It's a responsibility to be the king. You got my whole life in your hands, and I'm just warning you that if I'm going to be honest, I have to begin the story with my Baba Haji, even if the blood might shock you. But don't worry, dear reader and Mrs. Miller. Of all the tales of marvel that I could tell you, none surpass in wonder and coolness the one I'm about to tell. Counting the memories. Baba Haji kills the bull. My very first memory is blood, slopping from the throat of a terrified bull, and my grandfather, red-handed, reaching for my face. I would have been 3 at this time. Maybe I have memories before that. I don't know. If I did, they'd be flashes of tile patterns or something. I can make it up if you want, but really, it was the blood, and the bull braying, and the gurgling sound. People ask, really? Really, was it blood? They ask because they don't believe me. They don't believe because I'm some poor refugee kid who smells like pickles and garlic and has lice, and I'm probably making up stories to feel important. I don't know what the American grown-ups have for memories, but they can't be as beautiful as mine. So they laugh. They don't touch me, but they roll their eyes. Okay, they say. It is, I say. It's one of 2 memories I have of my Baba Haji. I promise I haven't been careless with it. My heart clenches it like a fist. Like gripping a ball bearing as hard as you can, the fingers dig into the palm, and you don't even know if it's still in there. The knuckles are white,
and you're afraid it fell out and you didn't even notice. You're just clenching nothing until your nails cut into your palm and you bleed. The memory is small, barely a few pictures. His face is one still image. It begins in a big gold car. It isn't real gold, just painted the color. It was so big the seats were 2 couches on wheels. The car drives on a dirt road through a desert in the middle of Iran, specifically on the road to Kurdistan. Excuse me. That doesn't mean anything to you, probably, if you even bothered to pronounce it. I could have said on the road to skip this word, you're a dum-dum Stan, and it'd be the same. It was a desert in a faraway land. You want a map? Here's a map. When I say the words, people think it may as well be Mars or Middle Earth. I could say we drove a chariot pulled by camels and they'd believe me. But it was a Chevrolet, and we were normal back then. I wore sneakers with Velcro and had a dad. He had a bushy red mustache and could make weird faces to be funny. He would blow out his cheeks and furrow his eyebrows like a super serious chipmunk. He drove. My mom sat beside him and handed us pieces of pistachio cardamom cake. The road went up and down like an ocean. On either side was sand that could suck down half the car before we could even get out. Some places the sand blew over, so you couldn't see any road at all. Excuse me. My dad drove so fast it was like a boat going up a wave and crashing down the other side. My sister and I would shriek as our butts lifted off the seat. My mom would say, "Ah, Masood, slow down, you'll kill your children." But this was the road my dad knew by heart, because he was born in Kurdistan and he was going home. He drove hungry for his mom's stew and yogurt. His dad was my Baba Haji. This trip happened every weekend for a while, so this part isn't my first memory. I'm just telling you how it happened every time. The drive would have happened before I saw Baba Haji slaughter the bull, but I'm not certain. The cake could have been rose and honey. My mom could have said, "Ah, Masood, not this again." His mom could have made kebab and yogurt. But those aren't differences that make a difference. The next image is parking outside of the stone walls of my grandfather's courtyard. I see myself because this part is not my own memory. It was described to me by my mom. So imagine from up by her head, looking down at me. I'm 3 years old. I wore corduroys. I carried my stuffed sheep, Mr. Sheep, in one hand and a stick in the other. I wanted to be a shepherd. My cheeks were chubby and people pinched them constantly, so I scowled a lot. I was the serious chipmunk. "Ah, so cute, the cutest boy you have ever seen," my mom would say. I am now in school in Oklahoma and no one agrees with this. I am told it would be dusk in the village of Kurdistan by the time we arrived. The sun shined red behind a dusty mountain. The house was surrounded by a wall 10 feet high. It was 600 years old and made of stone. The garden was inside the wall. It was lined with mosaic tiles. The trees were almond, peach, and fig. At the center was an inlay fountain that cooled you with its whisper. In the corner was the well. But we hadn't seen any of this that first time. I just know it because it's a place in my mind. I could go there now if I wanted. When the teachers brought us to the sod house in Oklahoma and told us it was 98 years old, I asked why they'd made a museum out of it. The teacher looked at me like I was simple. "Because we preserve and cherish historical things," she said. "But no one lives in it?" "No. So every 98 years, people move out of their houses and turn them into museums?" She looked away at this point, probably because her answer would have been, "What are you, simple?" "Okay, class, hold a buddy's hand and keep moving." The first time we went to Kurdistan, the time I'm telling you about, we got out of the car outside of the walls and heard the sound of men shouting and hooves clonking on the stone. My dad said, "Stay here," and ran around to the entrance to see if it was one of those demons who hide behind the hedgerows. We didn't stay there, of course. He wasn't the kind of father you listened to. I remember approaching the gate. Louder and louder the men shouted, curses, "Yallah, yallah." I turned the corner. In the courtyard by the well was a bull. 4 grown men from the village struggled to hold it down. A giant beast. Its eye was black and bigger than any marble in my collection. In it was a swirl of panic, sweating, shaking, insane with fear. A knife lay on the stone where one of the men had dropped it. The bull saw me. Its eye looked at me. I remember this because it is the only time I have ever been begged for anything. The bull let out a sound I can only say was like opening your mouth and trying to push all the food out of your stomach. One of the men slipped off the wet hindquarters and fell. My dad ran over to help, but before he reached them, my grandfather emerged from the house. Well, I can stop there, I suppose. That was 7 pages, the first 7. And it goes from there.
So Daniel, how did you guys end up in Oklahoma, in Edmonton?
Well, so as sort of a curiosity of refugee and asylum seeking. So when we were in Italy in the refugee camp, we were basically applying to all the kind of Western nations, right? So at that time, you know, my mom would tell us like we could end up in Canada, in Australia, in the UK, so her sister actually ended up in Canada. Her mother was in the UK. So we actually assumed it would be one of those. But there was this family in Oklahoma, in Edmond, Oklahoma, where they had signed up to be as part of this organization to take in a refugee family. And so, and this is a really big deal. In the book, I try to convey it. I mean, it's a young kid, so he doesn't express the real, you know, the economic stakes of it. But when you sign up to have a family, especially like a single mom with 2 kids under the age of 10, you're signing up for, you know, you're co-signing for their livelihood. So so it was quite a commitment. And this couple, their name is Jim and Jean Dawson, had done that. And so we were assigned to them and found our way. So we knew no one in Oklahoma. We knew no one actually in the United States. But because they had sponsored us, we ended up there.
Kathleen, I want to just make sure we have time for the questions in the chat too.
Yeah. Well, why don't I throw one in? Maybe Daniel could talk about his use of Scheherazade story and why he uses it in his book, and that's from Kathy Shepler.
Sure. Thanks, Kathy, for the question. So Scheherazade is kind of a, I mean, golly, how does she map? Like, she's more than a Disney princess. She's almost like the patron saint of storytelling, right? In my culture, the story goes at the beginning of the 1001 Nights that this sort of evil king was in the habit of marrying women and then the next morning killing them, right? And he did this because he was betrayed by his first wife. He sort of has this like horrible misogynistic kind of like trauma response to walking in on his wife, you know, sort of cheating on him. And so he does this, and he becomes this monster, and Scheherazade is the daughter of his advisor. And when she sees that the women of the kingdom are being mistreated this way, and horribly so, she goes to her father and says, I want you to marry me to this king. Her father is absolutely horrified. Why would I ever do this? And because she has a plan. And so she does, she gets her way, she marries the king, and that night she tells him a story. And the way the story goes is that she begins telling this really sort of fantastical, amazing sort of story, and it's so intriguing that when the morning comes, it says, you know, but was it something? It depends on the translation, but it'll be like, but the light of the morning or the light of the sun interrupted Scheherazade, and she lapsed into silence. And so you get this moment where the king goes, wait, and he wants to know more, and he spares her life, and she tells the rest of the story the next day, and so on and so for 1001 Nights. And there's this really amazing interpretation of that actually my wife and I were talking about just last night, about how you start to watch her tell him stories, and at the beginning of the nights, these stories, everyone is reacting in like the most chaotic, traumatic way ever. Like genies will come out of bottles and be like, you know, you're in my clutches now, and then he's like, he's gonna just like murder everyone in the fisherman's family, and all the responses are super hyper violent, and as you go, the story actually, it's like there's some complexity, and the characters actually respond differently, and it almost feels like this gigantic, what is the word, like depiction
of watching somebody rehabilitate someone else out of like a PTSD response mechanism. Like he's clearly being coaxed out of this, and I think it's sort of just one of the layers of the Arabian Nights is that this storyteller is like bringing him away from the lip of madness and giving him, you know, and by modern parlance we would say helping him to exhibit empathy, but you know, that's part of the mythology of the stories. And so I've always loved that dynamic, and I think the narrator you know, refers to it because he feels like he's standing in front of a room full of you know, dubious classmates who feel like they are murderous audience members and critics. In my own way, maybe I was also preempting any critics who didn't like my book and turning them into misogynist kings and myself into virtuous Scheherazade, but not really. It's really just a theme that I go back to a lot. I love the Arabian Nights, so that was why she entered.
So we have another question from Rebecca. She wanted to know how long the family sponsored your family.
We lived with them, I believe, for about 6 weeks. It's that part's really hazy for me because you know, when you're a kid, time is. I could have sworn we lived with them for a really long time, but when I sort of was doing the research and things like that, it turned out it was a lot shorter than I remember it. So it was about you know, just short of 2 months. They were very kind. I mean, we were basically, during that time, my mom sort of got her green card, got a driver's license. You know, we found an apartment complex that is in the story, and sort of began to sort of just like life at that point. It was summer, so it was July and August, and then by the time we started school, we were in an apartment.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How did you manage to assimilate right into the school when you barely spoke English?
Well, I didn't clearly, I didn't do that great, but I spoke some. Like I describe it as like a little bit worse than a poo from The Simpsons. You know, like I had a very, very bad accent. I clearly had learned English by the book, but during our time in Italy in that 6-month period, I refer to it, I think in the book, right, where we found a family that had been homeschooling, and they had these workbooks that the kids were working on, and they luckily had 2 kids my sister and I's age, and so we were practicing English. We knew it was, as I said, we knew it was going to be Australia, Canada, England, or the US, and so it was going to be English, that we knew. So I had some. I scored like D's on my like 2nd grade English. You know, it's pretty hard to score a D as a 2nd grade English class. So I mean, there was no ESL, and I kind of just made my way through it. But a lot of it I also ascribe to when you're that young, 7, 8. You know, you acquire pretty quickly, especially when you're fully immersed. But when we came to the US, there was a lot of catching up to do. We would go to the library, check out, you know, and as a 2nd grader, picture books are just a little bit, well, it depends. I mean, the fast readers in 2nd grade were definitely past the picture book stage. I was not. And in fact, a lot of picture books were very difficult. Like Dr. Seuss that dude makes up a lot of words. And so you cannot trust him if you're trying to learn English. But we started with a lot of picture books and just kind of worked our way through it. The motivation is pretty strong when quite literally everything, including friendships and you know, foods, all of it is, you know, behind the sort of gate of learning this language. We learned it pretty quick. I sort of lost my accent. I mean, I guess I don't sound like I have an accent, right? Most people say I have an Oklahoma accent, actually, you know, interestingly, but I think I started to sound semi-native around 3 years in, 2 to 3 years in. So before that, I would say things like comfortable,
And and people would be like, what did you just say? I say, this chair is very comfortable. And it was like that. It's now it sounds like a total joke parody accent, but
Well,
all right,
both
but
Lois and Rebecca don't hear an accent at all.
yes.
Can
I
I-
now edit books, and anytime there's a joke with my team that anytime I make a mistake, which are just honest mistakes at this point, I have nothing. I will sometimes backpedal and be like, well, it's my third language, so I can't be blamed for anything.
Can I ask you, Daniel, was there a Miss Miller or more than one Miss Millers, that sort of teacher who inspired you? And
Yeah, so there were, but no, she's not one human, unfortunately. I mean, well, fortunately, I had quite a few of them who were very kind. So she's a composite, and yeah, I definitely had some teachers who absolutely. I look back now and were just saints, such really really kind people. There was a Mrs. Harold who sort of taught me everything. She actually, Mrs. Harold is the teacher who pulled me aside once and kind of knocked some sense into me about that idea of like, around the middle school age is when you realize that you could, the 80-20 rule, you're like, with 20% of the effort, I can get an 80% grade. So like, why would I do more? And she's the one who really knocked that sense into me of like, no, your job is to do better. So I really appreciated Mrs. Harold, and there's just a slew of them, really. But yeah.
There's a question in the chat about Mr. Sheep, and I also have a question about Mr. Sheep. Why couldn't he have been left at home? Why the field? And was that so incredibly devastating for you? By the way,
so the first part's really easy to answer is no one was checking. Like Mr. Sheep was literally under my arm at all times. So he was an appendage. And the way my mom tells it is she's in this panic. We're in the car, we're driving. And at one point she looks back and it dawns on her what has just occurred. So we're like literally in the car when it occurs to her. And so she's like, what am I gonna do? Rip this thing out of this kid's hand? Or it was clearly like a panic response from my mom there's a moment, in case anyone's listening who's doesn't know, there's a moment where I have this Mr. Sheep, and we have to sort of like pretend let him free in a field because we were rushing to an airport where he would not have gotten past security. And so, so my mother, basically we're in the car and my mom kind of does that, like, in the movie version, it's like a screech. And we're like, oh my gosh, how do we get this sheep out of this kid's hand? Was it devastating? Yeah, it's so funny. Memories are weird that way, but yeah, I love that. So what's funny is my mom was probably more traumatized than I was, because we were talking about it recently. Literally every birthday and Christmas since she would get me a gift, and then there's almost always a stuffed sheep involved. So I have a collection of stuffed sheep that would put many shepherds to shame now. And I really do. I had to pull her aside and be like, you gotta stop buying me stuffed sheep. I'm okay. I am not in need anymore of these things. But yeah, for a long time she would buy them. I'm sorry?
She's in need of it.
Yeah. For a long time, she really was trying to make up for that one, which is,
So Daniel, I'm going to read you a few comments that we've got in here. Artists wrote, I like how you associated many of your memories with food.
Yeah, no, that's I come by that one honestly. I actually, before I was in publishing, I was a pastry chef, which is the coolest job if your knees can handle it. And mine couldn't do it anymore. But I think of food as the ultimate art form. It's the only art form you experience with all your senses at once, which I think is really neat. So I end up thinking about that as the most immediate art form.
And then we've got something from Leslie Mandros Bell. She wanted to say, first of all, thank you for this amazing book. The arc of this story deals with coming of age, coming to a new country, remembering and honoring the past and personal history, and beginning to find your own voice. How would you see your narrator, going forward in life, balancing the world he lives in with the world he will always have left behind?
Oh, that's really good. That's a really good question. I mean, in some ways, I guess I was sort of destined to, not destined, that's probably the wrong word, but one way I process it is by telling a lot of stories. That was sort of baked into my background, I guess, based on this. So I think, how would I see going forward? Yeah, I think the compulsion to sort of share that experience, and I don't mean share the experience as in like tell you what happened to me. I mean share the experience of sort of the magic of the storytelling experience, right? The magic of being enraptured by it, by being sort of taken away, by being ensorcelled by a good story. Like some of the best, kindest things I read is when someone will say, I was reading it and like all the time got away from me, or some people, you'll see people say something like that, or I was standing in the kitchen and I read 3 chapters, and those are kind of, that's the experience I think about all the time, is how the story can do that. So, and this is how stories take us past our current circumstances. So I guess I would see the character kind of finding that in his own way.
And here's another one from Artist. She wants to know what became of your sister. Did she go to business school? Is she the CEO of a company? She seemed very driven.
Yeah, she's very driven. Yes to almost all that stuff, but in different roundabout path. She went to business school, and she became a consultant for a while. Became a writer, teaches at university. And yeah, she's a very, very driven person, which is and kind of set the pace for my childhood. I was always trying to keep up with my sister.
What is her reaction to your book?
I don't know. We haven't been in touch in a while, but I used to joke that I was always the runt of the litter, because she really is the impressive one. But yeah, she lives abroad, and it's been a minute.
So we have another kind of question, not really a question. It's from Rebecca. She wrote, this book broke my heart. In my insular hometown, there were two different, one Japanese and one African American families, in addition to the Laotian refugees. I felt so much for them at the time. Now I feel even sadder.
Well, I mean, if I can give you any solace, for what it's worth, like I think of my childhood as a super happy one. I know that sounds a little, I know there were happier ones. I met my wife and I couldn't believe she had the childhood she had, because she had like a really nice one. But I mean, so I am aware that there are easier paths of it, but I was sort of over the moon by my experience, in the sense that there was a lot of adventure, and there was a whole lot of joy. So I guess in that sense, I would hope the same for those families. But one sort of has to make their own path through it. But I don't actually think of it as a sad. I actually had some different like executives will read it at different companies and things, that when they're talking like film people and stuff like that, and a lot of them will say like, well, this would be a very hard film, and I'm like, really? Is that, what do you mean? I thought it was just a really funny book. I'm not saying I'm not aware of the difficulty. I just mean, as I said, I think you can kind of, my mom sort of set a pretty strong tone of finding a hopeful way of going about it.
There's a comment from Lois Washington. She wants to thank us for holding this meeting with you. And she also said, this book was a bright light of my pandemic quarantine.
Oh my, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
And then we've got another one from Rebecca. She wants to know if you could please, please, please talk about the paragraph on page 263 that starts, "To us, parents are like blankets. I had an abusive parent, so I didn't share his experience. Yet I've never read something that hit me as hard. His sister is not the only impressive one."
Thank you. I'm gonna have to go find that paragraph and see if I can read it real quick. So it says, oh man, this is a tough one. Just after I said I had a happy childhood. Rebecca, you're calling me out. I hear you. No, to us, parents are like blankets or parachutes in a world that is otherwise full of snakes and leopards. So who's the us? If you're a kid reading this, there isn't anything you can do about it, but Bronies can at least remember when you fight in front of kids, what you're really doing. To us, parents are like blankets or parachutes in a world that is otherwise full of snakes and leopards and committee men, tornadoes, bullies, and death. And as a kid, you're looking out and seeing all this with a near constant spike of adrenaline, always a second from panic, because you understand you can't do much. You're a little ball of soft meat with no shell or escape skills or battle strategies. You're a milk drinker with milk teeth that fall out and you bleed. Yeah, so this is, I'm happy to talk about this. This is a sequence in the book where the family, you would just say, my mom and my sister and I, my mom married this this man by the name of Ray, and there was a very particular, you know, it was a very, well, what was the word for it? Cantankerous? Was that a good euphemism? It was a very cantankerous relationship. And what I was trying to do was, yeah, I think articulate the feeling of when you're a kid and you're watching the sort of Mount Olympus, the fires on Mount Olympus, and you can't do anything about it. Like there's a fundamental like helplessness that that happens when the sort of the adults in the room are fighting, and that sort of chaos ensues. And so he's trying to express that to the kids in Oklahoma, sort of kids that he interestingly presumes don't have that sort of life. And I think his horizons are expanded by actually seeing, you know, throughout the book that their lives are just as hard. Like he sort of, you know, there's a sequence in the book where it says, you know, when the immigrants came, they thought that the United States was like paved with gold. And I think there's one of the things that I really wanted to do with the book was to have this kid be wrong about his audience. Like he opens with this sort of really off-putting kind of like, you don't want to know me. You're, you know, like he assumes they're all rich. He assumes they're all, and this isn't, you know, that's not true. These are just, you know, human beings with difficult lives and you know, in Oklahoma. And so he has to sort of come to that understanding as well, that that the Oklahoma kids are not, you know, that you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is he has to take a step toward them. It's not the job of the kids there to sort of like just celebrate his difference and celebrate like he has to be a good guest. They have the obligation to be a good host, but he has to be a good guest, and to do that he has to really see them as people. And so that's a sequence where he's trying to express this is what life is like, and he sees later that many of them have lives like that. So that's my off the top of my head about that paragraph.
Here's from Lee Tempkin. She wrote, "You're an amazing storyteller and writer. What's next?"
Oh, gosh, I hope stuff. I'll tell you what I'm working on. Yeah, I mean, it's coming out hopefully with Arthur. It's a story set in the 11th century Silk Road. I became really obsessed with the Silk Road about 7 years ago. And specifically that era where, so the Silk Road was these sort of 4 major capitals, which is so Xi'an in China, which Chang'an was what they called it then. So this is like the coast, eastern coast of China,
all the way to Turfan, which is the kind of the western side of China, to Samarkand, which is in Uzbekistan, and then Baghdad in Iraq. And so the Silk Road was this sort of network of trade routes that, interestingly, was incredibly rich in different religions, people groups, languages. In fact, it was a kind of a more, so by some measures, it was a more metropolitan space than like modern day New York City, right? And I wanted to set a story there, and so I decided to set kind of a little bit of a comedic romp, where it's about this kind of huckster merchant. Like, have you ever seen The Music Man? He's a lot like The Music Man. He goes from village to village swindling people. And in the opening, you have this little boy, and he's part of a order. He's a monk. He's a young monk boy who the order is very similar religion to the Zoroastrians. So it's a Manichaean religion. Anyway, he's committed a heresy, and they're stoning him. It opens with him about to get stoned, and this huckster by the name of Samir shows up and like sort of swindles the monks and buys him, and for like what seems like a treasure, he's swindled them, and so you get this very quickly. You get this odd couple where this young boy, who's a very serious boy, he sees himself as a religious person, is now owned by this merchant who he sees as a truly unserious, sacrilegious kind of like man, and so they start this friendship as they were going across the Silk Road. Very quickly in the story, they find out that all those villages that he's been swindling got really fed up with him, and they each hired a different assassin to come and kill him. So the boy ends up having to rescue his master over and over again. And so the story is called The Many Assassinations of Samir, the Seller of Dreams. And yeah, I'm really excited about that. That should be
I'm excited too.
Thank you. That's the most I've ever told anybody, so don't tell anyone. This isn't being recorded, so it'll be totally fine as long as you guys keep it to yourselves. Kathleen's like, it's being recorded. What are you doing? No, I know it's fine. It's fine. I can tell people that, and a lot of. I write a lot of poetry, so hopefully some of that will find the light of day. I just doing I just finished a retelling. I wanted to tell a story about a stuffed bear that gets left in the park during a performance of Shakespeare in the park. And so he falls in love with the bard and decides to create his own production out of all the stray animals in Central Park.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's in rhyming color. It's bonkers. I don't know who the audience is. It's just myself playing around. So
we have a couple more questions. Sarah Ansari wants to know, what's your favorite Iranian food and dessert, entree, snack, anything?
I can go on. No, the best of the best, like is ghormeh sabzi. Ghormeh sabzi is like a very rich. Ghormeh sabzi means like gourmet greens. It's like a green stew with chunks of steak and kidney beans in it. I know it sounds silly, but it's like a superfood. If I used to play football in Oklahoma, and like 2 hours before the game, I would eat a bowl of this, and you felt like you could run through a wall. And all my football player friends would make fun of me, and they're like, "This is gross, man." And they were all eating their like Chipotle and whatever. And by the time the season ended, my mom had to make bowls for like all my friends because everyone swore by ghormeh sabzi. So I think ghormeh sabzi is the best. Obviously, we're a kebab culture. Our hamburger is the kebab. So a good kebab is a wonderful thing. Dessert, we've got a lot, but my favorite is our ice cream. We have an ice cream flavor that is saffron, rosewater, and pistachio. Which, look, I know that, like, I used to be a pastry chef. Like, you have to, every night you get 300 orders of molten chocolate cake and 4 orders of bread pudding. So the chocolate to anything else ratio in dessert land is nuts. Lemon
is the second place, but a distant second. So when I tell you saffron, rosewater, and pistachio, I know it doesn't sound like your favorite flavor of ice cream, but it's good. It's very, very good. That's probably my favorite dessert we do. A good cream puff, of course, is pretty great. Those are my favorite foods, but I'll eat anything.
So we've got one more question from Stacy. She wants to know how you came up with the title.
Oh, so I love long titles, as you can tell by the second book I'll be working on. And so I wanted, I'm a sucker for that. But Everything SAD is Untrue is actually it's a little twist on a quote from The Lord of the Rings. There's a moment in there where Samwise Gamgee they're all mourning. It's the lowest point of their sort of emotional arc. Gandalf is dead. Everything's gone wrong. And they hear the sound of laughter. And they look up and they see that Gandalf has returned from the dead. He's now Gandalf the White. If you're into this stuff, like I was very into it, I still am, but you know what I'm saying. As a kid, I loved that scene. And Samwise asks this really delightfully naive question where he says, is it true, Gandalf? Is it, are you really returned? Is everything sad going to become untrue? Which is such a oh my gosh, I just adore a character like that really is holding on to sort of with both hands this possibility of good things in this world. And so I was like, that is the feeling I wanted to get. But I was like, the narrator of my story, he's a little bit more presumptuous. He's a little bit more, what is the word? Like, he's a little more, he makes assumptions quite often. And so I didn't want it to be everything sad will become untrue. I think my narrator would have just been like, well, if it's going to be in the future, then you may as well claim it in the present. So everything sad is untrue. It sounded more like his voice. I also love it because it's fundamentally not a true statement, right? Obviously, we live in a world where quite a few sad things are true and are real. So I wanted there to be a very immediate feeling in the reader of being like, wait, is that a real statement? Like, everything sad is untrue, and people will be like, oh, that's really beautiful. And it's like, yes, I like that. If you believe that true is ultimate, so there's a lot of ways you can sort of cut this quote, but I wanted more than anything to instigate the reader to start to question every claim, every idea, and ask it for themselves, ask themselves what is true. So that is where the title came from.
Hey, Daniel, do you mind sending us book plates or something? Because people are asking about how they can get their books signed. And I think the best way to do it is book plates.
Sure. Yeah. If you email me, I can forward it. There's a store of them with the gentleman at the publisher, and I can forward it to him. He can send you a bunch.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are kind of at the end of the hour, but boy, it went really quick. And I'd love my staff to come on board. Everybody, can everybody undo their mics and their muted cameras? And I just want to say that this truly is the book that has unified my staff. I was very reluctant to read it, and when I read it, I couldn't stop. Daniel, thank you for writing such beautiful words and such a beautiful story, and welcoming all of us into your not always easy world, but a world that we all loved hanging out in for the time we were there. So if anybody else wants to say anything while we have Daniel on the line.
Oh, just thanks for your book. Silly and Sublime is completely the right the right description.
Oh, thank you so much.
I love it when I can laugh and cry at the same time, preferably. Yeah.
Oh, I do too.
Same.
A lovely book. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's obviously you are quite literally the most discerning readers out there. You are the people at the center of the of the book world. These things come along your way, so I don't take this lightly. Obviously, I think your compliments count for double, and I really truly appreciate it. It means the world.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks for
Thank
taking.
you for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
having me.
And I can't wait for the next book.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
please
so
stay in touch.
Will do.
And
the same
tell
to you.
Arthur I said hi.
I will. I was speaking to him soon. All right.
All right, good night all.
Cheers.
Good night.
Good night.